The low hum of the scanner echoed through the pristine white laboratory as Daniel Kane lay strapped to the examination platform. He wasn't the first human to be brought to the Velmarin Genetic Research Tower, but he was certainly the most defiant. The restraints at his wrists and ankles were standard protocol, though the analysts insisted they were merely precautionary. 3 weeks into his captivity, and Daniel still refused to believe that particular lie. Subject 117, remain still for baseline calibration, came the cool, measured voice of Sistema, the lead analyst assigned to his compatibility trials. Her pale blue skin seemed to glow under the harsh laboratory lights, and her 4-fingered hands moved with practiced precision across the holographic interface. Daniel shifted deliberately, watching with satisfaction as the neural readings fluctuated wildly on the overhead monitors. "I don't do quiet," he said, his voice carrying more confidence than he felt. "And I have a name. It's Daniel." From her observation deck above the lab, Rainey watched the exchange with growing irritation. As overseer of the facility and Sistema's sister, she had higher expectations for this particular trial. The human male had been specifically selected for his genetic markers that showed exceptional promise for the Velmarin Research Initiative. Yet 3 weeks of testing had yielded minimal progress, largely due to the subject's persistent insubordination. "Sistema," Rainey's voice crackled through the lab's communication system. "A moment, please." With a tight-lipped expression that Daniel had come to recognize as frustration, Sistema activated the scanner's autonomous function and ascended the spiral staircase to the observation deck. The transparent walls allowed Daniel to watch the sisters' interaction, though their voices were now muted. "Your handling of the subject is inefficient," Rainey said, her taller frame imposing as she towered over her sister. Unlike Sistema's scientific attire, Rainey wore the sleek black uniform of Velmarin Military Command, her shoulder insignia marking her as a high-ranking officer. "The Council expects results, not excuses." "He's resistant to standard compliance protocols," Sistema replied, her fingers nervously adjusting the silver cuff at her wrist, a nervous habit Daniel had noticed during previous sessions. "His neural patterns are unlike the other human subjects. There's an unusual spike in the prefrontal cortex whenever—" "I don't need the technical details," Rainey interrupted, her violet eyes narrowing. "I need compliance. The Alpha 3 trial begins tomorrow, and this subject must be properly calibrated. Do whatever is necessary, but get it done." The sisters' gazes shifted simultaneously to Daniel, who offered them a sardonic smile and a small wave of his restrained hand. Rainey's expression darkened, while Sistema quickly looked away, returning to her console with renewed determination. "Resume scan sequence," Sistema commanded, and the machinery hummed to life once more. Subject 117. "Daniel," she corrected herself, something unusual flickering across her features. "The calibration will be more effective if you cooperate." "What exactly am I cooperating with?" Daniel asked. Not for the first time. 3 weeks of poking and prodding, and no one will tell me what these compatibility trials are actually for. Sistema hesitated, her fingers hovering over the interface. The question was reasonable, yet protocol strictly forbade sharing research objectives with test subjects. She glanced up at the observation deck, where Rainey had been joined by 2 other military personnel. Their attention focused intently on the proceedings below. "The trials assess biological synchronicity between species," she finally said. Her voice lowered. "That's all I can disclose at this time." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Between humans and Velmarins." When Sistema offered no response, he continued. "Is that why all your subjects are male? Are you looking for breeding compatibility?" The sudden flush of deeper blue across Sistema's cheeks confirmed his suspicion before she could compose herself. "That's an oversimplification," she said stiffly, activating the next scan sequence with more force than necessary. "Now, please, remain still." The scanner's beam intensified, bathing Daniel in pulsing blue light. Despite his instinct to resist, he found himself complying, curious about what Sistema might inadvertently reveal if he played along. The readings on the monitor stabilized, displaying a three-dimensional map of his neurological and physiological responses. "Interesting," Sistema murmured, almost to herself. "Your autonomic responses show remarkable adaptability." Her eyes met his briefly, before darting away. "We haven't seen this pattern in previous subjects." "Lucky me," Daniel replied dryly. "Does that mean I get a gold star? Or maybe you'll finally loosen these restraints?" Before Sistema could respond, Rainey's voice cut through the lab once more. "Conclude today's session. Prepare for midnight recalibration." Sistema's posture stiffened visibly. "Midnight recalibration is not standard protocol for—" "It is now," Rainey interrupted. "The Alpha 3 trial cannot be delayed. I'll oversee personally." As the scanner powered down and the platform returned to its horizontal position, Daniel caught Sistema's troubled expression. Whatever this midnight recalibration entailed, it clearly concerned her, which meant it should probably terrify him. "See you at midnight, I guess," he said as the automated transport gurney activated to return him to his containment quarters. "I'll wear something nice." Sistema didn't smile, but her eyes held his for a moment longer than usual. "The procedure requires no preparation on your part," she said formally, though her voice carried a note of something almost like warning. "Rest while you can." The gurney hummed as it carried Daniel from the main laboratory through a series of security checkpoints. His quarters, while comfortable by detention standards, were no less a cell for their aesthetic considerations. The transparent eastern wall offered a breathtaking view of Valara's violet skyline, the twin moons already rising over the horizon. It was a calculated design choice. He'd realized early on, the beauty of an alien world serving as a constant reminder of just how far he was from home. As the door sealed behind him with its familiar pneumatic hiss, Daniel tested the restraints around his wrists. The Velmerans had developed a peculiar technology for their bindings. They allowed reasonable movement while preventing any action that might be interpreted as aggressive or escape-oriented. The first time he'd tried to pry open an access panel, the restraints had constricted painfully, loosening only when he'd stepped away. Now, as twilight descended over the alien cityscape, Daniel settled onto his sleeping platform, his mind racing with possibilities. Midnight recalibration, the Alpha 3 trial, breeding compatibility. Each new piece of information only raised more questions, and the answers seemed increasingly unlikely to work in his favor. "Computer," he said aloud, addressing the room's automated system. "What is the purpose of midnight recalibration?" "Information restricted," came the predictable response. "Inquiry logged and forwarded to oversight." Daniel sighed, closing his eyes. He would need his strength for whatever awaited him at midnight. But sleep remained elusive as the moons climbed higher in the violet sky. Several levels above, in the private administrative sector of the tower, Sistema confronted her sister in the secure conference chamber. "Midnight recalibration is excessive," she insisted, her professional composure slipping. "His readings are already more promising than any previous subject. Standard protocol would suggest at least another week of baseline testing before—" "Your attachment to standard protocol is becoming problematic," Rainey interrupted, not looking up from the data tablet she was reviewing. "The Council has accelerated the timeline. All promising subjects are to advance to Alpha 3 trials immediately." "All subjects?" Sistema echoed. "There are others being fast-tracked." Rainey finally looked up, her expression unreadable. "No, only yours. Subject 117 has shown unique potential." Something cold settled in Sistema's stomach. "Unique how?" "My reports indicate promising compatibility." "Yes, but nothing that would warrant skipping essential calibration phases." A thin smile curved Rainey's lips. Your reports, sister, are meticulously accurate regarding the data, but they fail to capture certain observational nuances. What do you mean? Rainey set down her tablet and activated the room's central display. Footage from the laboratory appeared, multiple angles showing Sistema conducting various tests on Daniel over the past 3 weeks. Watch yourself, Rainey instructed. The way you adjust your posture when he speaks, the unnecessary physical proximity during manual scans, the extended eye contact. Your pulse rate increases by an average of 12% when you're alone with him. Heat rushed to Sistema's face. That's absurd. I maintain strictly professional interactions with all subjects. Perhaps you believe that, Rainey said, her tone almost sympathetic. But the data suggests otherwise. She advanced the footage to that day's session. Here, when he challenged you about the purpose of the trials, you disclosed information? Minimal, yes, but disclosure nonetheless. Sure. Basic transparency improves compliance, Sistema argued. It's documented in our own research. Is that why you called him by name instead of designation? Rainey asked, her voice deceptively soft. For compliance. Sistema fell silent, suddenly aware of the dangerous territory their conversation had entered. Attachment to research subjects was more than unprofessional. It was a violation of Velmarin's scientific ethics, punishable by immediate removal from the project and potential revocation of research credentials. I maintain my objectivity, she finally said, her voice controlled. But I will recuse myself from the midnight recalibration if you believe my judgment is compromised. Rainey studied her sister for a long moment before shaking her head. That won't be necessary. In fact, I'm assigning you primary authority for the procedure. I'll merely observe. Confusion replaced Sistema's anxiety. I don't understand. The purpose of compatibility trials is to assess potential for successful genetic integration, Rainey said, rising from her seat to stand at the window overlooking the sprawling research complex. Emotional resonance is a factor we've historically undervalued. Your response to this subject may actually be scientifically significant. You're suggesting my alleged attachment is a data point? I'm suggesting, Rainey said carefully, that your instinctive recognition of compatible traits may be precisely why you were selected to lead this division. She turned to face her sister fully. The midnight recalibration will proceed as scheduled. You will conduct it alone, with only remote observation. Use whatever methods you deem most effective to prepare the subject for tomorrow's trial. As Sistema left the conference chamber, her thoughts in disarray, she failed to notice the calculating expression that settled on her sister's face or the private communication Rainey initiated on her wrist device. Proceed with monitoring protocol Alpha, Rainey murmured into the device. Full spectrum capture of recalibration chamber activity. Priority clearance. My authorization only. The midnight hour approached with inexorable certainty. In his quarters, Daniel had managed a fitful rest, waking frequently to check the time display embedded in the wall. At precisely 23:45, the door slid open to reveal not the usual automated gurney, but Sistema herself, flanked by 2 silent Velmarin guards. It's time, she said, her professional demeanor firmly in place despite the unusual hour. Please come with me. Daniel sat up slowly, noting the absence of the transport restraints typically used to move him between facilities. No gurney tonight? I'm flattered. The recalibration chamber is in a secure section, Sistema explained, her eyes not quite meeting his. Standard transport protocols are insufficient. As Daniel stood, the guards moved to flank him, their postures making it clear that cooperation was not optional. He followed Sistema through corridors he'd never seen before, deeper into the heart of the research tower. Unlike the clinical white of the main laboratory, these passages were rendered in muted blues and purples, the lighting subdued. So, what exactly happens in a midnight recalibration? Daniel asked, breaking the tense silence. Sounds either very scientific or very kinky. One of the guards made a sound that might have been a suppressed reaction, but Sistema's stride didn't falter. "It's a specialized neural mapping procedure," she said evenly. "More intensive than standard scans, requiring minimal external stimuli and absolute focus." "External stimuli like other people watching?" Daniel guessed. Sistema's slight hesitation was answer enough. "The procedure is conducted with minimal observation to ensure optimal data integrity." They arrived at a curved doorway at the end of a narrow corridor. Sistema pressed her palm to the security panel, and the door slid open to reveal a chamber unlike any Daniel had seen in the facility. The room was circular, its walls a deep indigo that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. At its center stood not the expected examination platform, but what appeared to be a reclined chair surrounded by suspended scanner arrays. "Guards will remain outside," Sistema instructed, and the two Velmerans took positions flanking the doorway as it closed behind Daniel. Alone with Sistema for the first time, Daniel felt a shift in the atmosphere between them. Her professional facade remained, but there was a tension in her movements, a careful distance she maintained as she guided him to the chair. "The restraints here are different," she explained, indicating the chair's open design. "They respond to neural patterns rather than physical resistance. If you remain calm and cooperative, you'll experience no discomfort." "And if I don't?" Daniel asked, settling cautiously into the chair. Sistema's eyes finally met his fully. "Then we both will." She activated the console beside the chair, and delicate filaments of light encircled Daniel's wrists and ankles. Not solid restraints, but clearly some form of containment field. The recalibration creates a temporary neural link between subject and analyst. Your responses affect mine, and vice versa. Daniel's eyebrows rose. "That seems like a pretty intimate setup for a clinical procedure." "It is necessary for the depth of calibration required," Sistema said, though something in her tone suggested discomfort with the arrangement. The Alpha-3 trial involves significant neurological synchronization. Without proper calibration, the process could be damaging to both participants. As she spoke, Sistema adjusted settings on the console, and the lighting in the chamber dimmed further until only the soft glow of the instruments illuminated their faces. Above them, a dome of tiny lights activated, creating the impression of being beneath a star-filled sky. "Neural link initiating," she announced, her voice taking on the formal cadence of scientific procedure. "Subject 117, please focus on the pattern overhead and regulate your breathing." Daniel looked up at the simulated stars, which had begun to pulse in a rhythmic pattern. Despite his instinctive resistance to their procedures, he found himself following her instruction, his breathing synchronizing with the gentle pulsation of the lights. "Good," Sistema murmured, settling into a smaller chair that emerged from the floor beside his. She placed her palm on a glowing panel beside her seat, and the star pattern above them intensified. "Now we begin the neural mapping." A warm sensation spread from the base of Daniel's skull. Not unpleasant, but distinctly foreign. He could feel something, or someone, touching the edges of his consciousness, like fingers gently testing the surface of water. "That's you?" he asked, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. "Yes," Sistema confirmed, her own voice slightly strained. "The link allows surface-level neural exchange. I can sense your overall cognitive patterns, emotional states, and physiological responses. Nothing deeper without your participation." Daniel turned his head slightly to look at her. In the starlit darkness, her blue skin took on an almost luminous quality, her eyes reflecting the pulsing lights above them. "And what am I supposed to be participating in, exactly?" Sistema hesitated, then said carefully, "The calibration requires a baseline of trust to establish proper synchronicity. You need to lower your mental defenses, the barriers you've maintained since arrival." "You're asking me to trust my captors?" Daniel couldn't keep the edge from his voice. That's a pretty big ask, Sistema. The sound of her name on his lips sent a visible ripple through her composure. I understand your resistance, she said quietly, but this procedure cannot be forced. It must be mutual, or it fails. In the observation center, several levels above, Rainey watched the exchange with narrowed eyes. The neural link visualizer displayed the tentative connection between her sister and the human subject, a thin, fragile bridge of light between two distinct consciousness patterns. Insufficient synchronization, murmured the technician monitoring the display. The human is resistant. Increase sensitivity on Sistema's link node, Rainey instructed. Let's see how she handles more direct feedback. The technician adjusted the controls, and on the monitor, the connection between the two neural patterns flared momentarily brighter. In the recalibration chamber, Sistema gasped as the neural link suddenly intensified. Daniel's emotional state flooded her consciousness. His wariness, his frustration, but also his curiosity, and an unexpected undercurrent of attraction that he had carefully concealed during their previous interactions. What was that? Daniel asked sharply, having felt the surge in the connection as well. A calibration adjustment, Sistema managed, struggling to rebuild her professional barriers against the rush of shared consciousness. Sometimes the system compensates for resistance. Daniel studied her face in the dim light, suddenly aware that the link worked both ways. Just as she could sense his emotions, he was beginning to feel hers, her scientific fascination warring with personal interest, her conflicted loyalty between protocol and growing doubt. You're not telling me everything, he said. Not an accusation, but a simple statement of fact. About the trials, about what happens after calibration. Sistema's gaze dropped. I can't. Can't or won't? Both. She looked up again, and Daniel was startled by the intensity in her eyes. But I can show you, through the link, if you'll allow it. Not the classified details, but my understanding of what we're doing, my perspective. It was an unprecedented offer, a glimpse behind the clinical facade into the mind of his captor. Daniel hesitated, weighing the risks against his need for information. Show me, he finally said. Sistema placed her hand on the console again, but this time she also reached out with her other hand, stopping just short of touching his arm. Physical contact intensifies the link, she explained, her voice barely above a whisper. May I? Daniel nodded, and her cool fingers settled on his forearm. The effect was immediate, the tentative bridge between their minds expanding into a broad channel of shared consciousness. Images and concepts flowed between them. The Velmarin concern about their declining birth rates, the discovery that human genetic material offered unique revitalization potential, the careful selection of subjects based on genetic markers, the ultimate goal of creating viable hybrid offspring to ensure Velmarin survival. But beneath these scientific objectives, Daniel sensed Sistema's personal struggle, her growing discomfort with the treatment of human subjects, her questioning of methods she had once accepted without hesitation, and most surprisingly, her genuine fascination with him specifically. You've been advocating for better treatment, he realized aloud. For more disclosure to subjects. Sistema nodded, withdrawing her hand as the intensity of the connection became overwhelming. With limited success, she admitted. The military oversight, including my sister, prioritizes results over methods. And what happens to the subjects after the trials conclude? Daniel asked, already suspecting the answer from the fragments he'd glimpsed in her mind. Those deemed compatible are offered a choice, Sistema said carefully. Participate in the hybridization program with certain privileges, or return to Earth with modified memories. And those deemed incompatible? Her silence was answer enough. In the observation center, Rainey leaned forward as the neural link visualizer displayed an unprecedented level of synchronization. "What are they discussing?" she demanded. "Activate audio enhancement." "Audio capture is degraded by the neural field," the technician replied. "We have visual and biological markers only." Rainey frowned at the display, where her sister's and the human's neural patterns had begun to harmonize in a way she had never observed in previous trials. "His physical parameters," she said suddenly. "Show me the comparative analysis." The technician brought up Daniel's biological data alongside the averages from previous subjects. Rainey's eyes narrowed as she studied the measurements. "He's smaller than our optimal parameters in physical structure," she noted with a dismissive gesture. "How is he achieving this level of neural compatibility?" "Unknown," the technician responded. "But neural compatibility has proven more significant than physical attributes in previous successful pairings." Rainey's lips thinned. "My sister appears to believe so." She tapped her finger against the console edge, considering. "Prepare the Alpha 3 chamber for immediate use, following recalibration. I want this subject tested at maximum parameters." Back in the recalibration chamber, the neural link had begun to stabilize at a level of synchronicity that had both Daniel and Sistema breathing more easily. The initial disorientation of shared consciousness had given way to a peculiar comfort, like settling into warm water. "The midnight hour has passed," Sistema noted, checking the time display on her wrist device. "Recalibration is proceeding more efficiently than anticipated." "Maybe because you finally told me the truth," Daniel suggested. Through the link, he sensed her guilt at not having done so sooner. "Hey, I get it. You have your orders." Sistema shook her head slightly. "Orders that I'm increasingly questioning." She adjusted something on the console, and the restraining fields around Daniel's wrists loosened noticeably. "The Alpha 3 trial tomorrow. It will be challenging. The neural synchronization we're experiencing now will be intensified tenfold, along with physical stress testing." "Sounds like a party," Daniel said with forced lightness, though his apprehension leaked through the link. "Will you be running that test too?" "Yes." Sistema met his eyes directly. "The Alpha 3 trial requires direct analyst participation. That's why this calibration is so critical. We must establish baseline compatibility to prevent neural damage during the more intensive procedure." Daniel absorbed this information, understanding more fully why Sistema had risked sharing restricted information. "And if the trial is successful, what happens then?" "Then you would be officially classified as compatible," she said quietly, "and offered the choice I mentioned. To become a breeding partner for your species," Daniel clarified, watching her expression carefully. "Specifically matched with—" The flush of deeper blue across Sistema's cheeks answered before she could. "Compatibility is determined at the individual level," she confirmed. "The analyst conducting successful trials is considered the optimal genetic match. So you and I would—" Daniel let the implication hang in the air between them. "That is the protocol," Sistema said stiffly, though the neural link betrayed the complex emotions beneath her professional veneer: scientific dedication, warring with personal desire, and ethical uncertainty. Daniel was silent for a moment, processing this revelation. Then, with a slight smile that contained more genuine warmth than anything he'd shown since his arrival, he said, "Well, that makes this midnight session feel a lot more like a first date." The unexpected comment startled a laugh from Sistema, a sound so genuine and unguarded that Daniel felt it echo pleasantly through their neural connection. For a brief moment, the power dynamic between them dissolved, leaving simply two beings connected in understanding. The moment was shattered by a sudden alert from Sistema's wrist device. She checked it, her expression instantly shifting back to professional concern. "Recalibration complete," she announced, though Daniel sensed her reluctance as she began powering down the neural link. "Rest period authorized before Alpha 3 trial." As the connection between them faded, Daniel felt an unexpected sense of loss. The restraining fields deactivated completely, allowing him to sit up as the chamber's lighting gradually increased. "What time is the trial tomorrow?" he asked, watching as Sistema efficiently reset the chamber systems. "Or 900 hours," she replied, not looking at him directly, now that the neural link was severed. "You'll be transported to the Alpha 3 chamber after your morning nutrition period." Daniel stood, stretching muscles stiff from the reclined position. Without the neural link, the professional distance between them had returned. Yet something fundamental had changed. He could still sense the echo of her thoughts, her conflicted loyalty, her genuine concern for his well-being. "Sistema," he said softly, causing her to finally look at him. "Thank you for the truth." She held his gaze for a long moment before giving a slight nod. "The guards will return you to your quarters," she said, her voice formal once more. "Try to rest. Tomorrow will be demanding." As if summoned by her words, the chamber door slid open to reveal the same two guards who had escorted them earlier. Daniel allowed himself to be led away, glancing back once to see Sistema standing motionless in the center of the chamber, her expression unreadable in the now bright light. In the observation center, Rainey reviewed the recalibration data with growing interest. Neural synchronicity exceeded all previous records, she noted. Despite the subject's physical limitations, the compatibility markers are unusually strong, agreed the technician, particularly in the limbic response centers. Rainey's lips curved into a satisfied smile. "My sister always did have excellent scientific instincts, even when she doesn't recognize them herself." She rose from her seat, gathering her data tablets. "Maintain surveillance on both subject and analyst until morning. Report any unusual communication or behavior." As she left the observation center, Rainey's private thoughts remained her own. The recalibration had confirmed her suspicions about her sister's unusual connection to this particular subject, a connection that could prove valuable beyond the standard hybridization objectives. If properly leveraged, it might just secure her own advancement within the Council's hierarchy. Morning arrived with the harsh chime of Daniel's quarters alert system. He had slept surprisingly well despite the pending trial, perhaps an after-effect of the neural synchronization. As he prepared himself with the provided hygiene materials, he found his thoughts repeatedly returning to Sistema, to the glimpses of her mind he had experienced, to the unexpected alliance that had begun to form between them. The door to his quarters slid open, revealing not the expected guards, but Rainey herself, her tall frame imposing in the doorway. "Subject 117, she greeted him coolly. "A word before your transport." Daniel straightened, instantly wary. "Good morning to you too, Overseer. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Rainey entered the room, allowing the door to close behind her. Without the neural link, Daniel could only guess at her thoughts, but her calculating gaze made him instinctively brace for confrontation. "You've made quite an impression on my sister," she said, her tone conversational despite the underlying edge. "Her reports have always been exemplary, but her latest observations of you are unusually detailed." "I'm a detailed kind of guy," Daniel replied carefully. "Is there a problem with that?" Rainey moved to the transparent wall, looking out at the morning skyline of Valara. "The problem, subject, is that my sister appears to be developing an emotional investment in your case. That could compromise her scientific objectivity. Or it could improve your results," Daniel countered. "Isn't emotional compatibility part of what you're testing?" A thin smile curved Rainey's lips as she turned back to face him. "Indeed it is. Which is why I authorized last night's recalibration." She took a step closer, her height allowing her to look down at him with studied assessment. "You are physically smaller than our optimal parameters. My sister insists this is irrelevant, given your neural compatibility scores." Daniel refused to be intimidated by her deliberate emphasis on his size. Quality over quantity, he said with a deliberate smirk. Maybe that's a concept your research hasn't fully explored yet. Instead of taking offense, Rainey laughed, a sharp, cold sound, unlike her sister's genuine mirth from the night before. Bold words from a specimen in captivity, she observed. We shall see if they hold true in today's trial. She moved to the door, then paused. The Alpha-3 trial involves significant physical stress alongside the neural synchronization. Many subjects find it overwhelming. Thanks for the warning, Daniel said dryly. It wasn't a warning, Rainey corrected him. It was context for what I'm about to tell you. The trial has two possible outcomes: success, which leads to the hybridization program, or failure. Her violet eyes held his with merciless clarity. There is no middle ground, no partial compatibility. You either synchronize fully with my sister, or the process terminates. The deliberate ambiguity of terminates was not lost on Daniel. I'll keep that in mind. See that you do. Rainey activated the door. The guards will transport you shortly. Good luck, subject. For my sister's sake, if not your own. After she departed, Daniel sat heavily on the edge of his sleeping platform, his mind racing. The threat had been clear enough, but so had the revelation. Sistema was now as invested in the outcome of today's trial as he was, possibly at risk herself if he failed. The guards arrived minutes later, fitting him with the standard transport restraints before escorting him through the facility. This time, they took a different route, ascending several levels to a section of the tower he hadn't seen before. The corridors here were wider, the security more visible, suggesting they were approaching a high-priority area of the research complex. They finally arrived at a massive circular door bearing warning symbols in the angular Velmarin script. As the guards verified their clearance, Daniel noted the unusual thickness of the door and the multiple security protocols required for entry. Whatever the Alpha-3 trial entailed, it clearly warranted extraordinary containment measures. The door cycled open to reveal a chamber significantly larger than any laboratory he had previously encountered. The space was dominated by two raised platforms, surrounded by complex machinery, with a transparent barrier separating the platforms from a ring of observation stations. Technicians moved efficiently around the periphery, making final adjustments to equipment whose purpose Daniel could only guess at. Sistema stood at a central console, her attention focused on calibration readings until she heard their entrance. When she turned to face them, Daniel immediately noticed the change in her appearance. Gone was the standard analyst attire, replaced by a form-fitting bodysuit of silvery material marked with sensor nodes at strategic points. Subject 117 reporting as ordered, announced the lead guard, releasing Daniel's restraints with a coded command. Thank you, Sistema replied, her professional mask firmly in place despite the flicker of recognition in her eyes when they met Daniel's. You may withdraw. Trial protocols require isolation of test participants. As the guards departed and the massive door sealed behind them, Daniel approached the console where Sistema worked. Nice outfit, he commented, keeping his voice low. Is this what passes for workout gear on Valara? Neural conductive fabric, she explained, her own voice equally subdued. It enhances synchronization during high-stress testing. She glanced toward the observation stations, where several Velmarin officials had begun to gather, including Rainey. You'll need to change as well. Preparation chamber is there. She indicated a small alcove to the side of the main chamber. Inside, Daniel found a similar bodysuit sized for human proportions, along with instructions for proper application of the sensor nodes. As he changed, he couldn't help but wonder at the escalating intimacy of these compatibility trials, from clinical scans to neural linking to whatever this synchronized stress test would entail. When he emerged, Sistema was waiting near the dual platforms, her expression carefully neutral, despite the appreciative glance she couldn't entirely suppress as she took in his appearance in the fitted suit. The Alpha 3 trial consists of 3 phases, she explained, guiding him toward one of the platforms. Neural synchronization, physical endurance testing, and compatibility response analysis. Each phase builds upon the previous, creating a comprehensive profile of potential genetic viability. Sounds intense, Daniel observed, noting how the second platform was positioned to mirror his own. You'll be on that one? Sistema nodded. The trial requires simultaneous participation from both subject and analyst. Our responses will be compared in real time to assess compatibility. As they took their positions on the respective platforms, Daniel noticed the atmosphere in the observation ring had changed. The technicians had withdrawn to monitoring stations, and the officials, including Rainey, had taken seats behind the transparent barrier, their attention focused intently on the proceedings. Initiating Alpha 3 trial sequence, Sistema announced, her voice carrying the formal cadence of official procedure. Phase 1. Neural synchronization. The platforms beneath them began to glow with soft blue light, and Daniel felt the now familiar sensation of the neural link establishing itself between them. Unlike the gentle connection of the midnight recalibration, however, this link formed rapidly and with greater intensity, causing him to gasp as Sistema's consciousness collided with his own. "Easy," she murmured, her voice somehow reaching him both through the air and directly in his mind. "Let it stabilize. Don't resist." Daniel forced himself to relax, allowing the connection to develop naturally. Through the link, he could sense Sistema doing the same, her scientific training helping her navigate the sudden intimacy of their shared mental space. "Neural synchronization at 60%, announced an automated voice, proceeding to 70% threshold." The link deepened, and Daniel found himself not just sensing Sistema's emotions, but catching glimpses of memories. Her childhood on Valara, her scientific training, the pride she felt when selected to lead the compatibility research initiative. Simultaneously, he knew she was experiencing similar flashes from his past, his life on Earth, his recruitment for the cultural exchange program that had turned out to be a one-way trip to Valara, his initial fear giving way to determined resistance. "Synchronization at 80%, the system announced, proceeding to Phase 2, physical endurance testing." The platforms beneath them shifted, tilting slightly to require active balance. Simultaneously, the temperature in the chamber began to rise, creating the first hint of physical stress. "The heat chamber simulates extreme conditions," Sistema explained, both vocally and through their link. "It tests physiological resilience and adaptation capability." As the temperature continued to climb, Daniel felt sweat beginning to form on his skin, the bodysuit's material wicking it away, even as the sensor nodes measured his response. Through the neural link, he could sense Sistema experiencing similar discomfort, though her Velmarin physiology appeared slightly better adapted to heat stress. "Synchronization maintaining at 85%, the system reported. "Heat chamber at level 3, proceeding to level 4. The intensity of the heat increased further, and Daniel found himself breathing more rapidly, his heart rate accelerating to compensate. Through the link, he felt Sistema's concern as she monitored his vital signs alongside her own. "Your core temperature is rising faster than anticipated," she communicated directly through their connection. "Focus on controlling your breathing. Match mine." Daniel concentrated on the rhythm of her breathing, using the neural link to synchronize his own respiration pattern. The effect was immediate. His heart rate stabilized, and the sensation of overwhelming heat became more manageable. "Synchronization increasing to 90%, the system announced. "Subject adaptation positive, proceeding to level 5. In the observation ring, Rainey leaned forward with interest as the displays showed the human subject successfully adapting to stress levels that had overwhelmed previous candidates. "Remarkable," murmured the Velmarin official beside her. "Their neural patterns are almost perfectly aligned." Yes, Rainey agreed, her eyes narrowing as she studied her sister's readings. Perhaps too perfectly. On the platforms, Daniel and Sistema had fallen into a state of deep synchronicity, their movements mirroring each other unconsciously as they adapted to the escalating heat stress. Through their link, communication flowed without words, strategies for temperature regulation, encouragement, and a growing sense of shared accomplishment. Heat chamber at maximum level, the system announced, maintaining for verification period before proceeding to Phase 3. The temperature had reached punishing levels, the air shimmering visibly around them. Daniel's vision had begun to blur at the edges, his muscles trembling with the effort of maintaining his position on the tilted platform. Through the link, he could feel Sistema's own struggle, her determination to complete the trial, successfully pushing her beyond her normal limits. "We're almost there." Her thoughts reached him through the haze of heat. Just a little longer. Daniel focused on her presence in his mind, using their connection as an anchor against the growing disorientation. Something felt wrong. The heat was increasing beyond what she had indicated was the maximum level, the platform beneath him tilting at a more severe angle than before. "Sistema," he managed to say aloud, his voice ragged. "Something's not right." Through their link, he felt her sudden alarm as she registered the abnormal readings on her monitoring systems. "The heat regulation is malfunctioning," she realized. "The safety protocols are being overridden." In the observation ring, alarms began to sound as the technicians detected the malfunction. "Heat chamber exceeding authorized parameters," one reported urgently. "System not responding to emergency shutdown." Rainey rose from her seat, her expression betraying no concern despite the escalating danger. "Interesting," she murmured. "Let's see how they handle this deviation." On the platforms, Sistema had abandoned the formal trial posture, moving to the edge of her platform to access an emergency console. "The main system is locked out," she called to Daniel, her voice strained by the oppressive heat. "Someone has manually overridden the safety protocols." Daniel struggled to maintain consciousness as the temperature continued to climb. Through their neural link, now wavering under the extreme stress, he caught fragments of Sistema's frantic thoughts, her recognition that this was no accident, her fear for his safety, her desperate search for alternative emergency measures. "The auxiliary cooling system," she managed, both aloud and through their faltering connection. "It requires dual authentication. I can't activate it alone." Daniel forced himself to focus, pushing through the heat-induced fog that threatened to overwhelm him. "Tell me what to do," he gasped. "Secondary console," Sistema directed, pointing to a panel on his platform. "Need synchronized access codes. Through the link, I'll show you." Despite the excruciating heat, Daniel dragged himself to the console she indicated. Through their neural connection, Sistema pushed a sequence of commands into his consciousness, not Velmarin words, but a pattern of system logic that his mind could interpret through their shared awareness. With trembling fingers, Daniel input the sequence as Sistema simultaneously entered her own authorization on her console. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then, blessed cool air began to flow from emergency vents as the auxiliary system activated. "Primary heat chamber still non-responsive," Sistema reported, her voice steadier as the temperature began to stabilize. "But the auxiliary cooling will prevent critical failure." In the observation ring, the technicians worked frantically to regain control of the main systems. Rainey observed their efforts with calculated interest, making no move to intervene despite her authority to do so. "Sister!" came Sistema's voice over the chamber's communication system, sharp with accusation. "This malfunction bears the signature of a security test. Did you authorize this?" Rainey's expression remained impassive. "All compatibility trials include stress variables," she replied evenly. "The Council approved enhanced testing for promising subjects." "Enhanced testing, not deliberate endangerment," Sistema shot back. The human could have suffered permanent damage. Yet he didn't, Rainey noted, her gaze shifting to Daniel, who had slumped against his console as the temperature slowly returned to tolerable levels. In fact, he demonstrated exceptional problem-solving capability under extreme duress, a valuable trait for genetic incorporation. Through the neural link, which had stabilized as the environmental crisis abated, Daniel felt Sistema's fury at her sister's casual dismissal of the danger, and beneath it, a deeper emotion he hadn't expected, protective rage on his behalf. "The trial is suspended," Sistema declared, her tone brooking no argument. "Subject 117 requires immediate medical evaluation." "The trial continues," Rainey countered, her authority clear in her voice. "Phase 3 remains to be completed. The data is too valuable to abandon for a minor system anomaly." Minor? Sistema's disbelief echoed through both her voice and the neural link. The heat chamber reached levels that could have caused neural damage. The synchronization metrics are already compromised by the emergency response, as the sisters argued. Daniel found himself in the unusual position of having access to Sistema's unfiltered thoughts through their connection. Her genuine concern for his welfare, warring with her scientific dedication, and her growing suspicion about her sister's motives. "It's okay," he said quietly, straightening as his strength began to return with the cooling air. "I can continue." Sistema turned to him, her surprise evident both in her expression and through their link. "Daniel, you don't understand. Phase 3 is the most intensive component of the trial. After what you've just endured—" "I understand better than you think," he interrupted, moving closer to her platform. Through their connection, he shared his realization that Rainey was testing not just his compatibility, but Sistema's loyalty. Refusing to continue would place them both in jeopardy. Sistema received his thought with a flash of admiration for his insight, followed by resignation as she recognized the truth in it. "Very well," she said aloud, for the benefit of the observers. "System, prepare for Phase 3, Compatibility Response Analysis." "Acknowledged," the automated voice responded. "Platforms reconfiguring for final phase." The tilted surfaces beneath them leveled out, and a new set of sensor arrays descended from the chamber ceiling. Through their link, Sistema sent Daniel a warning. This phase would test not just their physical and neural compatibility, but their biochemical resonance as well. "Initiating pheromone release sequence," the system announced, calibrating for cross-species analysis. A fine mist began to disperse from vents around the platforms, carrying synthesized compounds designed to trigger specific physiological responses. Daniel felt the effects almost immediately, a heightened awareness of Sistema's presence, an intensification of the neural link between them, and a rush of sensations that bordered on overwhelming. Through their connection, he could sense Sistema experiencing similar effects, her scientific detachment crumbling under the onslaught of biochemical stimuli. The compounds had been designed to simulate the natural attraction responses of both species, amplified to measurable levels. "Compatibility response at 60% and rising," the system reported. "Subject and analyst demonstrating positive resonance patterns." In the observation ring, the officials leaned forward with increased interest as the displays showed the escalating biochemical synchronization between human and Velmarin. Rainey's expression remained calculating as she monitored her sister's responses alongside the subject's data. On the platforms, Daniel and Sistema found themselves drawn physically closer, the neural link between them now so intense that boundaries between their separate consciousnesses had begun to blur. Through their shared awareness, Daniel felt Sistema's professional ethics battling against the artificially induced attraction, even as her body responded to the carefully calibrated compounds. "I didn't expect this level of intensity," Sistema admitted through their link, her thoughts tinged with both scientific fascination and personal embarrassment. "Is this how it usually goes?" Daniel asked, equally through their connection rather than aloud. "No," came her honest response. "The standard protocol involves much lower concentrations. This has been adjusted." Daniel didn't need their neural link to know who had ordered that adjustment. Rainey's calculated observation from the ring made her involvement obvious. "Compatibility response at 80%, the system announced, proceeding to final threshold analysis. The mist intensified, and with it, the biochemical responses of both participants. Daniel found himself mere inches from Systema, their platforms having automatically moved closer together as the trial progressed. Through their link, all pretense of scientific detachment had vanished, replaced by raw emotional and physical awareness. "Daniel," Systema whispered, both aloud and in their shared consciousness. "The final threshold requires close proximity. It measures potential genetic resonance at maximum compatibility." The implication was clear, both through her words and the images that flashed between their linked minds. The trial's culmination was designed to simulate the intimate contact that would be necessary for actual hybridization, not requiring the act itself, but measuring their body's readiness for such possibility. "I understand," Daniel said softly, "but only if you want this, Systema. Not because it's protocol, not because your sister is watching, because you choose it." Through their connection, her surprise at his words gave way to something deeper, recognition that in this moment of supposed scientific analysis, he was offering her the very agency that Velmarin research protocols had denied their subjects. The irony was not lost on either of them. "Compatibility response holding at 90%. The system reported. "Final threshold requires additional stimulus for completion." In the observation ring, Rainey's patience had begun to wane. "Complete the sequence," she ordered the technicians. "Increase pheromone concentration by 15%. "That exceeds safety parameters for the human subject," objected one of the technicians. "Override," Rainey commanded. "Authorization code Rainey Alpha 9. As the additional compounds flooded the chamber, Daniel felt the immediate surge in his system, a rush of heightened awareness, accelerated heart rate, and intense focus on Systema. Through their link, he sensed her alarm at the unauthorized increase, followed by her own body's inevitable response to the potent biochemical cocktail. "This is dangerous," she communicated urgently through their connection. "These concentrations weren't designed for human physiology." Daniel could feel the truth of her concern as his vision began to blur at the edges, his pulse racing dangerously fast. Yet beneath the artificial stimulation, something genuine had taken root between them, a connection that transcended the clinical parameters of the trial. With deliberate intent, he reached for her across the narrow gap between their platforms. "Then let's end this trial," he said aloud, his voice carrying clearly to the observation ring. "On our terms." Understanding flashed through their neural link, and Systema's hand met his. The moment their fingers intertwined, the sensor arrays around them erupted with data as their biochemical responses synchronized perfectly. "Compatibility response at 100%, the system announced. "Trial sequence complete. Analyzing results." But neither Daniel nor Systema was paying attention to the system's pronouncements. Through their neural link, now operating at unprecedented depth, they shared a moment of perfect understanding, recognition that what had begun as a clinical trial had transformed into something neither of them had anticipated. In a move that sent shockwaves through the observation ring, Systema stepped from her platform onto Daniel's, closing the remaining distance between them, their faces mere inches apart. She hesitated only briefly before pressing her lips to his in a kiss that defied every protocol of Velmarin's scientific procedure. Through their neural link, the kiss transcended physical contact, becoming a shared experience of mutual choice and defiance against the controlled environment that had brought them together. Daniel's arms encircled her, the sensor nodes on their bodysuits registering the contact and sending the observation systems into a frenzy of data collection. In the observation ring, chaos erupted as the officials witnessed this unprecedented breach of procedure. Technicians scrambled to record the unexpected data, while several of the Velmarin observers rose from their seats in evident shock. Rainey alone remained seated, her expression unreadable as she watched her sister's act of rebellion. When Sistema finally broke the kiss, the neural link between them remained intact, allowing Daniel to sense her mixture of exhilaration and apprehension at what she had just done. Around them, the trial chamber's systems continued their automated functions, recording and analyzing their responses as if this were merely another data point in the experiment. Alpha 3 trial concluded. The system announced with mechanical indifference to the emotional drama unfolding within its sensor's range. Subject 117 classified, compatible. Genetic viability assessment, optimal. Recommendation, proceed to hybridization program. Sistema stepped back slightly, though her hands remained in contact with Daniel's. "System," she commanded, her voice steady despite the storm of emotions Daniel could feel through their link. "Terminate neural connection and initiate standard cooldown sequence." "Neural termination protocol requires oversight authorization," the system responded. From the observation ring came Rainey's voice, coolly amused. "Authorization granted. Rainey Omega-3. The neural link between them began to fade, though more gradually than Daniel had expected. As their shared consciousness separated back into distinct individuals, he caught Sistema's final thought, a promise that this connection, once established, could not be so easily severed by automated protocols. The platforms began their automated return to rest position as the sensor arrays retracted into the ceiling. The pheromone compounds were rapidly filtered from the chamber atmosphere, leaving behind only the lingering physiological effects in their bodies. "Trial participants will report for medical evaluation," the system instructed. "Observation team will convene for results analysis in Conference Chamber 3. As the massive door to the trial chamber cycled open, admitting a team of medical technicians, Daniel and Sistema stood together on the platform. Physically separate now, but united in the knowledge that something fundamental had changed between them, and within the Velmarin research protocol itself. The aftermath of the Alpha 3 trial rippled through the research tower like a stone dropped in still water. Daniel was returned to his quarters without the usual restraints, his status upgraded from subject to compatible participant, a designation that carried with it certain privileges, including expanded access to facility sections and removal of constant monitoring. Sistema had vanished immediately following their medical evaluation, summoned to what Daniel could only assume was a disciplinary hearing regarding her unprecedented behavior during the trial. Through the lingering echo of their neural connection, he had sensed her determination as she departed, not fear or regret, but a steely resolve that suggested she had been preparing for this confrontation longer than anyone realized. Hours passed with no word or sign of either Sistema or her sister. Daniel used his newly granted access to explore previously restricted areas of his residential level, discovering an arboretum terrace that offered both fresh air and a spectacular view of the Velmarin capital sprawling beneath the research tower. As twilight descended over the alien cityscape, painting the crystalline buildings in shades of deep purple and gold, Daniel sensed a presence behind him. Turning, he found not Sistema as he had hoped, but Rainey, her tall frame silhouetted against the terrace entrance. "Quite a view, isn't it?" she remarked, moving to stand beside him at the terrace railing. "The founders built this tower at the highest point in the city to symbolize the elevation of knowledge above all other pursuits." "Poetic," Daniel commented, studying her carefully. Without the neural link, He could only guess at her thoughts, but her unexpected conversational tone put him on guard. "Where's Sistema?" "Preparing her report for the council," Rainey replied, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Today's trial yielded unprecedented results that require careful documentation. "You mean because she kissed me instead of treating me like a lab specimen?" A thin smile curved Rainey's lips. "Among other deviations from standard protocol, yes." She turned to face him fully. "You've had quite an effect on my sister." Subject: 3 weeks ago, she was the model of Velmarin scientific discipline. Now she risks her entire career with emotional displays during official procedures. "Maybe she's discovered there's more to compatibility than what can be measured by your machines," Daniel suggested, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Have you considered that possibility, Overseer?" "I've considered many possibilities," Rainey replied, her tone neutral, "including the theory that emotional resonance may enhance genetic compatibility beyond purely physiological factors." She paused, then added with deliberate emphasis, "It was, after all, the basis for my authorization of the midnight recalibration." Daniel's eyes narrowed as understanding dawned. "You expected this outcome. You pushed the trial parameters beyond safety limits deliberately, to force an emotional response. I created conditions that would test true compatibility under stress." Rainey corrected him. "A mating pair must function effectively in crisis, as well as in controlled environments. The Velmarin hybridization program is not merely about producing offspring. It's about creating partnerships that strengthen both species." "And Sistema was endangering her part of your experiment too?" Something flickered in Rainey's violet eyes, the first genuine emotion Daniel had seen from her. "My sister was never in danger," she said, a defensive edge entering her voice. "Velmarin physiology can withstand significantly higher temperatures than human biology. The risk was calculated." "But real," Daniel pressed. "You gambled with both our lives to prove your theory." "And it was proven correct," Rainey replied without apology. "Your compatibility rating is the highest we've recorded in any trial. The Council is most interested in the implications." Daniel turned back to the view, processing this information. "So what happens now? I'm upgraded from lab rat to breeding stock?" "That depends entirely on you," Rainey said, surprising him. "As a classified compatible participant, you have choices that were not previously available. You may accept placement in the hybridization program with full residency rights on Valara, or you may decline and be returned to Earth with modified memories of your time here." "And if I accept, I'd be paired with Sistema?" "That would be the logical assignment. Yes, given your demonstrated compatibility." Rainey studied him with clinical interest. "Does that prospect appeal to you, subject?" Daniel met her gaze steadily. "My name is Daniel," he reminded her. "And my answer depends on Sistema's position in this arrangement. Is she being given the same choice, or is she simply assigned to whoever tests compatible with her?" A look of genuine surprise crossed Rainey's features. "You misunderstand our society, subject. Daniel, Sistema is not property to be assigned. She is a leading scientist who voluntarily participates in the program she helps administer. The choice is as much hers as it is yours." "Then I want to hear it from her," Daniel said firmly, "before I make any decisions." Rainey considered him for a long moment before nodding. "A reasonable request," she conceded. "She will be available to discuss your options once the council review is complete." She turned to leave, then paused. "For what it's worth, I believe you would make a suitable partner for my sister. Despite your physical limitations, you possess certain qualities that complement her nature." With that ambiguous assessment, Rainey departed, leaving Daniel alone once more with the darkening skyline and his turbulent thoughts. The council review extended through the night and into the following day. Daniel remained in his quarters, declining the opportunity for further exploration of the facility in favor of processing all that had occurred. The echo of the neural link with Sistema had faded to almost nothing, leaving only a vague sense of her continued existence somewhere in the vast research complex. It was late afternoon when his door finally slid open to reveal Sistema, dressed not in her analyst attire, but in what appeared to be civilian Velmarin clothing, a flowing ensemble of deep blue that complemented her skin tone. She entered hesitantly, as if uncertain of her welcome. "You're free to go," she said without preamble. "The Council has approved your repatriation to Earth. Should that be your choice, the memory modification would be minimal. You would retain most of your experiences here, with only the classified aspects of our research obscured." Daniel studied her face, noting the fatigue in her eyes and the tension in her posture. "Is that what you want? For me to go back?" Sistema moved to the transparent wall, gazing out at the city, as she had seen him do so many times during his captivity. "What I want has never been the primary consideration in our research protocols," she said quietly. "But the Council has revised certain aspects of the program based on the results of your trial." "Meaning?" She turned to face him fully. "Meaning that I have been granted the authority to oversee the next phase of the hybridization initiative, with emphasis on emotional compatibility alongside genetic viability. And I have been given the choice of whether to continue as your assigned analyst, should you choose to remain." Daniel approached her slowly. "And what have you chosen, Sistema?" "I haven't," she admitted, meeting his gaze directly. "Not yet. I wanted to know your decision first." The honesty of her response touched him more deeply than any practiced persuasion could have. Through the fading remnants of their neural connection, he sensed her genuine uncertainty, her desire for him to stay warring with her ethical concern that his choice be truly free. "If I stay," he said carefully, "what would my life be like here? Would I be confined to this facility? Would I be expected to immediately participate in the hybridization process?" "You would be granted citizenship status with appropriate restrictions for a non-native resident," Sistema explained. "You would have quarters in the civilian sector, freedom to move within designated areas of the city, and access to educational resources about our culture and society." She hesitated before adding, "As for the hybridization process itself, that would proceed at a pace determined by both participants. The Council has accepted my recommendation that forced acceleration is counterproductive to optimal genetic resonance." "Your recommendation," Daniel repeated, a smile touching his lips. "You've been advocating for changes to the program." Sistema nodded, a hint of pride visible in her posture. "The data from your trial was compelling evidence that our previous methodologies were flawed. Emotional connection appears to enhance genetic compatibility by a factor of 3 compared to purely clinical matching. So our KISS basically rewrote Velmarin's scientific protocol?" The blue flush that spread across Sistema's cheeks was answer enough, though she managed to maintain her scientific composure. "The unscheduled intimate contact provided valuable data points regarding spontaneous compatibility response," she said formally, before her expression softened. "But, yes, essentially, it demonstrated that connection cannot be manufactured through clinical processes alone." Daniel closed the distance between them, taking her hands in his, a gesture that would have been unthinkable just days before. "Then my answer is yes," he said quietly. "I'll stay. Not as a subject or a specimen, but as a partner in whatever this becomes between us." Relief and joy flooded Sistema's features, emotions she no longer attempted to conceal behind scientific detachment. "The Council will be pleased with your decision," she said, though her tone suggested their approval was far from her primary concern. "And your sister, what does Rainey think of all this?" A complex expression crossed Sistema's face. "Rainey has been reassigned," she revealed. The council determined that her methodologies during your trial, while ultimately successful, represented an unacceptable risk to valuable research assets. Assets meaning me, Daniel clarified with raised eyebrows. And me, Sistema added. The investigation revealed that she had been conducting unauthorized surveillance and manipulating trial parameters for some time. She hesitated, then admitted. Though I believe she genuinely thought she was advancing our research, Rainey has always been zealous in her pursuit of results. Where has she been reassigned to? The outer colonies, Sistema said. There's a secondary research facility that focuses on environmental adaptation rather than genetic compatibility. Her skills will be valuable there, without the temptation to endanger test subjects. Daniel absorbed this information, wondering at the complex relationship between the sisters. Will you miss her? Sistema considered the question with evident surprise, as if no one had thought to ask about the personal impact of the reassignment. Yes, she finally said. Despite our differences, Rainey is my sister, but her departure opens the possibility for a more ethical approach to our work here, and perhaps to whatever develops between us. The tentative hope in her voice struck Daniel more powerfully than any neural link could have conveyed. In that moment, he recognized that they stood at the threshold of something entirely uncharted, not just for themselves, but for the relationship between their species. Then let's start over, he suggested, still holding her hands in his. Not as analyst and subject, but as Sistema and Daniel. Two people discovering compatibility on their own terms. The smile that illuminated her features transformed her from the cool scientist he had first encountered into someone new. Someone whose capacity for connection had merely been waiting for the right catalyst to emerge. I would like that very much, she said. And this time, when she leaned toward him, there were no trial parameters to measure their response, no observers to record their interaction, only the genuine attraction that had developed between them, despite every barrier of protocol and species. Their kiss held the promise of a new chapter, not just for them, but for the Velmuran hybridization program itself. What had begun as a clinical experiment in genetic compatibility had evolved into something far more profound, a recognition that true connection could not be manufactured or measured, only discovered through the courage to choose vulnerability over control. As the twin moons of Valara rose over the alien horizon, bathing the research tower in their silvery light, Daniel and Sistema stood together at the threshold of possibility, two beings from different worlds, united by the most powerful compatibility of all, the freedom to choose each other. In her new posting at the Outer Colony Research Station, Rainey received the official report of Subject 117's integration into the hybridization program. The document was filled with the expected scientific data, genetic markers, compatibility ratings, projected viability assessments, but it was the personal addendum from her sister that held her attention longest. The human adaptation proceeds better than anticipated. Sistema had written in a private note attached to the formal report. Daniel has begun language training and cultural orientation with remarkable aptitude. The Council has approved our petition for shared quarters in the civilian sector, with continued monitoring of compatibility development in a more natural environment. A small smile curved Rainey's lips as she finished reading. Her methods might have been deemed unorthodox, even dangerous, but the results were undeniable. The compatibility trial had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, including, perhaps, her own. Computer, she said aloud, addressing the station's automated system. Prepare a response to Research Director Sistema's report. Ready for dictation, the system responded. Rainey considered her words carefully before speaking. Official acknowledgement of report received and noted. Personal addendum to follow. She paused, then continued more softly. Sister, your success with Subject 117, with Daniel, validates what I have long suspected. that true compatibility transcends our clinical measurements. Perhaps he was not too small after all, but precisely the catalyst our program needed. I wish you both favorable outcomes in your continued partnership. Until we meet again. As she sent the message hurtling across the vastness of space to where her sister forged a new path for Velmarin research, Rainey turned her gaze to the stark landscape of the outer colony, visible through her viewport. Her own work here would continue, shaped by the lessons learned from Sistema's unexpected journey from analyst to partner. Sometimes, Rainey reflected, the most significant scientific breakthroughs came not from tighter control, but from the courage to let go, a lesson she was only now beginning to understand.